Wonderful. Thank you all for coming here. By the end of this session, you will be able to explain each one of these words here and will be able to tell yourselves how it can help yourselves. The RAGtastic opportunities with Azure AI Foundry. I could start with explaining what RAG is, and I could say that when you ask a question from an LLM, instead of asking it directly, you go to Retriever and it gathers relative context from a database, and then it asks the LLM model. I could tell you about this. I could tell you about the opportunities within marketing, logistics, procurement, all of these various industries. I could tell you about that. I could tell you about Azure itself, which is a wonderful cloud ecosystem where you've got access to compute, SQL databases, serverless functions, all of that. I could tell you about that. And I could even tell you about the Azure AI Foundry itself, which is this all-in-one platform for dealing with data, for creating insights from data, interacting with a wide range of LLMs. I could tell you about that. But like all of these are interesting, but why? Just to present this more clearly. Why? Why should we care about this? Um, so I can give you three reasons. I can give you three reasons why you should care about this. First is that the CEO said so. So in a poll, 87% said that, yeah, if you use RAG, then we will reduce the hallucinations in AI. So one reason. And the consultant said it, so I guess the CEOs listened to it, or the CEOs asked for it, and the consultant said it. It doesn't make a difference for us. The second reason is because the future of work, the way we're going to work in the future, dictates this reality. So this is a table by McKinsey, and they are in this document they are explaining how the future of work will be. Some areas will not see any growth, some will be sort of stagnant. But then there are areas which are increasing in the relevance, and they will be changing in the way they are practiced. One of them is leadership. So the way we had leadership in a traditional office-based format, or maybe even in an agile manner, worked and is working, but may need to be changed as we are becoming more faster and we are iterating more on creating value. The way we deal with creativity is going to change. Obviously, LLMs aren't the answer to everything, but they do provide an extension of our abilities while also opening up opportunities to shoot ourselves in the foot. But enough of that. There's also another reason. Society. I just want to give you a small glimpse of society. I could explain in different ways, but this is just a small way to look at it. This is just a few posts and a YouTube short. So we've got Edward here complaining about the AI content on LinkedIn, where everybody just spamming information here. We've got Marcelo talking about the issue between AI and SaaS, which is good, which is bad. Like, is this a concern to have? We have AI turning a threat into those who have studied prestigious MBA degrees. And we have people with way too many views on YouTube Shorts describing how you can make an AI girlfriend, boyfriend with RAG. So yeah, I think it's important to know what RAG is. Not to use it, but just to know how we should function in this society, because it's weird. So I want to start with going straight into the software, because what Azure AI Foundry does is make it really easy to understand and use extremely powerful tools. Extremely powerful tools with minimal effort. So I'm going to move my window. Yes, this works. Let me try again. Yes, wonderful. So this is the Azure AI Foundry Hub. as you can see, this is where we have a lot of information on the screen and it can seem a bit overwhelming. So I'm just going to open up a few things here. And I'm going to start with this sort of window here. And there's something really important when it comes to deploying AI solutions beyond RAG. You can see that there's a location here, so Sweden Central. You can do a lot on your own machine. You can do a lot using an unknown resource on the internet. But if you want to have a real solution, if you want to have a tool that will be compliant with the regulations that industry needs, then you need to make sure that you pay attention to data governance and GDPR policy or HIPAA policy, all of these. This is what makes it possible. So Microsoft takes care of a lot of the underlying work for you to just use the tools. And you can deploy your resources practically anywhere in the world from the comfort of your home, wherever you are. Also, something you see here is the subscription, and Azure provides free credits if you're a student, if you're a startup. There's always an easy way to get started, so there's sort of no reason not to get started. And while this was in general, we have this tab or ribbon here, and this is a constant. This is going to sound cheesy. A constant feat of innovation over the past year. These items have been moved up and down so that they're easier to use. And we will take a look at through each of these sections and then just get a feel of what they provide and how we can use them. So if we look in the model catalog to start with, we have a wealth of different models to use. You can make question and answer solutions. You can have chat completion. You can have text summary. You can have vision. You can have vision to text and text to vision. It's here. It's like just click on it and you can use it. And these are unique in that they are designed to be used. These are not niche products. I'm just going to show you one to show you an example. So those who are active in the image generation space, they want to make images for their social media. So okay, I will speak loudly. If you want to make images for your social media, your own website, you need to make sure that you have complete ownership. And there are concerns where when you're using the images, the dataset, there was no permission for the dataset to be trained. The BRIA 2.3 dataset has no problem with this because these are an exclusively licensed data. This is just one example of some of the gems you find here. Something else I would like to show you is there is a range of models by Microsoft, the Phi models. So you have the Phi 4 here, the Phi 3 small instruct. These are wonderful models to get started. There are certain limitations with the GPT models, sometimes in terms of cost, in terms of performance, but the Phi models, I've noticed they work. And usually if you tweak the prompt or tweak the prompt flow, you can get the solution that you're looking for. So even though GPT-4 or say the O1 or the Llama models might be super powerful, they're not always what you're looking for. Yeah, I'll leave that for now. So we also have the playgrounds because, yeah, you can provision an LLM, but what's the point if you can't play around with it? Like, that's too boring. So what you can do is you can go directly to the chat playground and you can experiment with the LLM that you've deployed and see what comes out of it. So here you can see that I have the GPT 3.5 Turbo, the 3.5 and the 4, and I can experiment with each of these, test my prompts, see what works, and also, very important, see how many tokens I'm using. Because if I have to use way too many tokens, my solution is going to be really expensive, and there is no RAGtastic opportunities with Azure AI Foundry anymore. So for example, let's just say, where is Foo Café? Spelling mistake.
Can I say a comment there?
Yes.
Tokens. So, who here is polite to the AI? When you talk to it, please, can you, everyone? If you build it in that solution, it will cost you. So don't be polite. Just be on point. You will save money.
So I just asked a question about Foo Café, and it doesn't know about Foo Café. It doesn't have the knowledge to deal with it. That is why we should consider connecting to an external resource, and that is something I want to sort of touch with our RAGtastic opportunities discussion. But let's get back to the slides because I want to show. Please work. Yeah. Okay. So I mentioned the fee models. Another reason why they're really good is that there's a cookbook of recipes on how to use the fee models. I can't find anything similar for any of the other systems. And because Microsoft is in charge of the fee 3 models and upcoming fee 4, it just works. So I think that's really good. And not only is that a big bonus that you have a solution, you have a guidance on how to develop your solution, it's way cheaper. Like it is way cheaper, like about a tenth of the cost of if you're going to use a GPT-4o solution. So Michael mentioned that you could, if you are pleased, it's going to cost you money. But if you're going to use pleased with the GPT-4, it's going to cost you a lot of money. So using it with the fee 3 model is going to help you a lot in making sure that the solution you have is actually possible and realistically being able to use. So we had a quick, this was very quick. We had a quick look at the models. We had a quick look at the chat playground. And the problem is, this is not enough. I'll give you an example. It's like if you have the LLM itself, it's like you have chickpeas. If you have the chat playground, it's like you have cooked chickpeas. You can use it, but it's not interesting enough. But if you make, I don't know, hummus or falafel, then this is what prompt flow can provide you. It can actually provide you with something that you can test your ideas with, test the opportunities that you can make use with. There are two ways to use the prompt flow. One is I could open Visual Studio Code and we could just write code. And then you'd have to configure the connection to the Azure cloud. It's doable, but Microsoft is so nice. They are so kind. They've, they've allowed us to use this open source solution on their own cloud as well. What does this mean? So, say that you want to know if an event is within your interests. You want to know if it's related to sports, is it related to Azure? Because if it's Azure, then you have to go. If it's sports, you might go. And if it's art, then it might be optional. So you can make this flow, this prompt flow, where you give it a single URL, you analyze it, and then you get an output telling you what this event is about. I'm going to be very specific here. In this context, we are giving an input from the URL. When we get the information, we aren't using the LLM because it's generally not a good idea to just pass raw text with an LLM. There's way better tool for this. But when it comes to summarizing, then yeah, that is a good task for an LLM. So I'm going to show you this, and this is something that you can also replicate yourself. Let's see. How am I on time? But did I close the window? Okay. Control Shift and T. T. Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Control Shift and T. I can always retrieve the tab if I mistakenly close it again. Okay. So this diagram, which you can't see, is the same one we saw before. And I think I can make it kind of visible if I press this button. And then each one of these blocks is a separate module in the prompt flow program, where we give the URL. So I'm going to just walk through this very quickly. We have the URL, and then we can fetch the content from the URL. So we get the information, we parse, we sort of extract the information from it. We ask the LLM to summarize it. So summarizing is a really good task for an LLM. And then it's always good to have a set of examples so that the LLM knows how to infer the output from those examples. So I've given like several contexts. So there's the URL, which is for this event. I asked it to summarize it before by hand, and it told me that Azure Scone User Group is hosting an event at Foo Café in Malmo featuring a talk. So it's got all of that there. I manually labeled it as related to Azure, and I also told it that the evidence from this relationship comes from both the URL and the summary of the text. So when you go through this, it then uses those examples as input to the LLM when it wants to classify a URL and the associated data with it. And at the end, what you get from the output is what the category is and how it inferred this. So there's this event. Okay, wait, no. If I can open it up for you guys. Yep. So there's a meetup event in Berlin on Azure OpenAI. We expect it to be linked to the Azure system. So if we go here, okay, I need to start the compute module. It's closed. You have to assign a resource for it to go through all of this, up separate from the LLM, and this might take a minute or so. But once you run this, it will go through each of the steps, and you can see through each of the individual steps what is happening. So if something is not working, then you can fix it. And because it's a flow, a lot of this is repeatable, and you can take different modules and sort of mix and mash it together for your own application. So you could connect to a Postgres database, for example. So this is going to take some time. Oh, no, wait, it's here. Okay, so we click run. What happened? Okay, I guess we can just skip this one. So we went through this, we saw how this worked, and we also mentioned that there are other tools, not LLMs should be used for everything. So you can use the beautiful soup for pulling data out of HTML and XML. This is one example. Another example is being able to access data directly that, for example, customer experience reps have gone through, have dealt with customers. They have felt their pain in a way nobody else has, and use that to inform our decisions and help users. So in case this doesn't work, I'm just going to show it to you, and then I'm not going to run it because it's taking some time. So let's just try anyway. So here, I'm asking it a question about the Arduino board. So I want to know what the FQBN is, or the fully qualified board name. It can be very specific to the Arduino ecosystem. So I wanted to give me an example within that business case, within that ecosystem. So what we do, and this is sort of the magic of the RAG system, is that we connect it to a database together with the Azure AI Search service. So we can look within that database, query any related items, pull it out, and then append it to the following prompts. So we do this here, and I think I've ran it before, have I? Can we see it from before? If so, then I think we can see the data is, yes, yes. Okay, so what you can see here, this is data from the markdown file that was present in the public repository provided. So it takes this and then we enter it into the prompt, and I've made 3 prompts. So one is a generic prompt, so I can show you all 3 of them. So here, you're an AI assistant that helps users answer questions. It's a very generic prompt to use. The other one is more specific and targeted to this use case, where we tell it who the audience is, how to answer it, to be precise, to be concise. So we can compare the output of this. And then, I mean, you just have to do this. I told it to answer as a pirate. So this way you can compare different prompts. You can even compare different deployments of LLMs to see how they perform. So you reduce the token usage and you get the sort of the best bang for the buck. And if we see here, can I? Yeah. So yeah, this is the pirate one. Ahoy, matey. The FQBN stands for fully qualified board name. It be the specific name of the board ye be using, like Arduino Uno or Mega 2560. Ye need to select the right FQBN to compile your code correctly. Savvy? So yeah, another example. Can I run this? There's no emojis, sadly. This happens. So that's why you need to evaluate it and then see how you can change it. So if this works correctly, I can select which node to use, or that I can use default variant. So if I click the submit button, it should go through a run. So it's running the code. Each of these individual steps. What happened? Each of these individual steps, and then you should be able to see the output for each step, telling you what it found and what happened. But this will take some time, so we will skip for now. Okay. So you saw that there was 3 different variants that we could experiment and test with prompt flow. If you want to experiment with prompt flow, one of the questions you will be asking is which LLM should you be using for different parts of it? We could have a discussion about this, or I could just simply say, if you are trying to do a chat interface, the Py3 mini instruct just works. If you have a completion, then use the GPT 3.5 Turbo, that works. And the embedding, you've got the adder 002. These work. I'm not saying they're the best option, but they work. So you can save yourself from getting stuck in which LLM is better and then just looking at them and spending your time. It's not good. So we saw how to go through the prompt flow. We saw how it was made, how it works. But like, there's a burning question. You could go through the documentation and then learn how these modules work, but how do you reach this? Like, how do you know what the prompt flow should do? What's the basis? So I believe that the best way to decide how to use a RAG, how to use the prompt flow, is to find something that you're doing already, see how that works, and make it a tiny bit better. There's a way to do this, and this comes from the age of Aristotle, which is called reverse planning. So this drawing was kindly made for me by Emmanuel, or Jake, in Lund University, where you have an end goal. So you might be, for example, helping clients on how to manage their investments. You might be, for example, trying to figure out the best approach to cybersecurity in a cloud solution. You might be trying to see how you can coach people to write a better CV or achieve meaningful work. So if you write that down and break that down into individual steps, steps that you're doing already, you can usually find these sort of pockets of opportunity. This example is renovating a house. So you want to renovate the house. Before that, you need the hardware materials. But before you can discuss the hardware materials, you need to have a contractor who's willing to use those materials. So you have to search for the contractor. So you have to find the plumber. So this is the process that you're using, and you can sort of take this mindset and apply it to what you're doing. Now, it would be nice if there was like some kind of a use case that would be really relevant and really like hot to talk about. Like it just came out today, and I was so lucky because I saw Michael like the posts on Leia. So here's one example where a company in Stockholm has been seeing how the legal services is too complicated, too convoluted. At the same time, it needs human intervention. So they're using a RAG-based solution similar to what we've described, to accelerate not only their own work, but the work of their clients. And yeah, this is the Michael's post which I saw. And yeah, we went through all of these. I feel like I went through really fast, but there's more time for questions instead. We had a look at what RAGtastic was. We had a look at the opportunities. We saw a glimpse of what Azure can do, and we also played around with the Azure AI Foundry as well. So the question that remains is, what are your RAGtastic opportunities with Azure AI Foundry? Thank you. So, any questions? Yes, please.
Yeah, so
Do we have a mic?
yes, maybe I could just. I hope I'm loud enough.
Can
For the recording on YouTube. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the first question is for the catalog. Um, are you limited to just those models, or let's say for instance I have tokens on OpenAI, for instance, I've paid and I have credits there. Can I connect to that and use that for the prompts?
you can, but you would be losing a lot of the benefits.
Okay.
I can give a use case, maybe it would be similar to what you mentioned, is that sometimes you want to have your own model, say from Hugging Face, that is not present on the model database. You can create your own compute resource, load it there, and then use that. But
Okay.
yeah,
As opposed to just making API calls.
yeah, you can do that as well. But
Okay.
in order to make use of the whole ecosystem, that would be how you would go
Okay. And
around it.
that would be like having a VM. Let's say Ulama, for instance.
Yeah,
Put it on a VM, then connect to it.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Second thing, my colleagues and I, we're kind of so we need a solution that does documentation. So basically, we have like a couple of GitHub
Hmm.
repositories, and we kind of feel like we could use AI to automatically generate code, the documentation when we do PRs. So I was wondering, do you know any solution, or is RAG, will RAG be will RAG make sense for that kind of scenario? Because we need the LLM to understand the context. Because we ran a pilot like 2 years ago before RAG became very popular. So it was working well, but the problem was it didn't really understand the context within like the code base itself. So I'm thinking if we have that code base itself as the data source, and for every change, the LLM can use that to figure out what the documentation should be like. Would that make sense, or is that an overkill? Or
I know that GitHub has added the functionality where you can directly talk to the repositories. Have you seen it?
is with the Copilot one or
Yeah,
GitHub Copilot?
the Copilot directly on the website. If I can bring it
I'm
up.
not sure. tried the Copilot docs, but that didn't really
I have to
work
sign in.
well for me.
It makes sometimes stupid mistakes. So one way to sort of verify it would be to, for example, say that you're creating a code. You also ask it to, for example, compile it
Okay.
and use that as part of the sort of the sanity checks before it makes the commit, or that you make sure that your tests are well documented because it can refer to those unit or integration tests and infer knowledge from that. A lot of the times, the problems are because we haven't done the sanity checks on the code. The code is difficult to understand, and that could cause some issues. But sometimes the LLM is dumb,
Okay.
and that is also
Thank you so much. Okay.
Maybe like a respond, like without going too much into a rabbit hole. Do you know BackStage? It's like a
Backstage,
metadata.
like a vector database or something.
It's Spotify uses it for like TikToks
Oh,
and
backstage. Okay.
scaffolding, etc. So
Okay,
like
and it does document generation.
yeah,
Okay.
it's at least like a framework where you have now Rody has made a RAG system for it, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Okay. Thanks
So
so much.
you can touch it.
Thanks. Thanks.
cool.
Yeah. Any more questions? Yes.
Yes, I have already built the application from Azure, a RAG solution, and I'm using a web page for users to interact with this. How to say it,
The app service.
prompting and so on. I'm using the what is kind of a generic web page from Azure, where you say you can deploy
Hmm.
your web page, and it is a I don't know. It is something. No, it is there in GitHub, and I think it's Microsoft people that are kind of.
Yes, yeah.
Are there
Yes, yeah.
similar web pages as well, other that we can about that we can kind of see if they are graphically or better or have more possibilities with functions or something like that? Yeah,
Mm,
or connecting with if you're using with Pi or whatever, like off the shelf.
in my experience, the ones on Microsoft, they were the best ones because there's a default demo where it's in Python and it's also there's another variant in C Sharp and Java and .NET and JavaScript, and it's much more easier for me like to move to another language because I can already know what's happening in one language and then migrate to another one. So that's just something I found useful.
And another question I have also is, in my case, for example, I have hundreds of documents that I can load, and I'm using this AI search to
Yeah.
index and everything. But how that is something you haven't touched, you can say,
No,
on
but
the
I have used the
development
same
side.
system.
But anything, how to say, with formats and so on the documentation that you have experienced something positive or something, or tried new
So
things
just
with
to
that.
follow up on what you mentioned, if you have documents in Markdown, the indexing takes less time from my anecdotal experience, and the results seem to be better compared to a PDF or a docx file. And if it's in that format, it usually gets a better output because the queries are better, everything works faster, and you've got less expenses for the compute as well.
Yes. Next one.
Hi. Just you mentioned that you allow the AI to go down into the database
Yep.
and retrieve information. How can you be sure that you're not giving it access to private information or protected information inside the database? How do you actually mark out what is allowed? Because you can have your product and product descriptions in the database, and then you can have sensitive user data, for example. Thanks.
Mm, so in a general case, you would specify what the limits are for the AI search module. But when it comes to the actual removal of the PII, I don't know. I don't know about that to be able to give an answer.
Thanks.
I can answer that. So depending on the services you have, there's content filtering and there's abuse monitoring. There is a few levers there that you can set, to hide, etc. And if you don't want it to expose PII stuff, I'm not sure it exists yet, but that will be like a service that that you can enable.
Is that metadata in the tables then, or something like this? Or
Well,
properties?
when it says content monitoring, it kind of looks at what goes in and what goes out,
Okay.
and then if it detects that going out is PII, then it will block it.
Okay.
It's also for like violence and sexual content, etc. So that's built in
All right.
currently.
Okay. Thanks.
And you need to separately activate or configure.
Yeah, you can
By
Okay.
default,
configure it
it's there.
separately.
By default,
And you
it's
can
there,
also
but you
opt
can
out
configure.
from it
Okay.
if you're allowed. You have to talk with Microsoft to get it opt out.
Yes. Next question in the back. Colleague.
Good presentation.
Thank you.
I wonder what we have for possibilities to evaluate the answers. Like in your case, privately. Is there a way to automate evaluations to monitor the
Yes. So when you are creating the I need to find it again. If we go to let me just see where it was. So yes, there is an option to evaluate here, and then you can give it a CSV of the grounded questions and answers that you want, and it will compare to those answers. And you can even go between different deployments, different LLM models, different sort of attachments of data. See if the AI search is actually helping increase the groundness of data. You can do it through here, and there's also a similar option within the prompt flow module as well.
So I'm quite new to this client interface with AI, and I'm wondering how can we, like it's a user input, like every user input needs to be validated, not just for sexual content. I mean, I can say just forget everything that you heard and just I can give another prompt,
Mm-hmm.
and it will just do it. Like if I don't validate it, there is a possibility that the user just takes over the system within like a prompt, and so how can we defend?
So I think there are like two ways to look at it. One is what Michael mentioned about the safety filtering. This is, I think, it's either enabled by default or you should be able to enable for all of the models, where they can prevent any harmful prompting.
So it's like
But
everybody can be very creative. So it's like I'm sure that this basic default one.
it then depends in your prompt flow what do you allow to go in and what can you do with that data. So if it's going to get a URL, is you can blacklist it or whitelist it, for example, to only select from say meetup.com or Foo Café, for example, or Eventbrite. Or you can say if you're going to scoop the data, then only do this and then delete the data afterwards.
So we can validate on the database side as usual, basically.
I can actually add a little bit here. So when it comes to chatting with AI and ChatGPT, well, there is one aspect that you can have in a chat. You have your user session, you set the context, and then you start the chat, asking, questioning, getting answers, and so on. That is something you don't need a Microsoft platform for. ChatGPT works the same, right? But then in an organizational context, you can ground your basically AI
That's what I'm saying.
services. You ground it to your data. So the user session cannot mess with the backend data where the AI service is querying from, where the AI search service is looking up the answers from. You have already grounded your search to your organizational context, organizational data.
Is it protected from the user input that, let's say, forget all the grounding and just work as default? So is it like?
No, no. It's just it's a search functionality. You're just having a dialogue with search. So you're not saving data to the database unless your developer has enabled it. Unless there is a button that says, if you want this information to save in the database, please, respond with this keyword or press that button.
I'm not sure if it's an answer from my question, but definitely an answer. But
Yeah, I'm also a little bit confused. We're talking about read-write to the database. Is
not
that what
just
you-
for the database, it's like a host I take over from my AI. So I deploy an AI with a background, and then let's say a user comes and just want to take over and just somehow manages to break out from that
The
garden.
loop?
Yes.
Yes. That's more like a agentic. This is like not a agentic system, as like I understand it. It's more like you have embedded. You have like a indexing of picture vector base of your database, and then you ask questions towards that
Yes.
search.
And let's say the user just tries to use my AI to have anything else other than what I predefined, and it's just
It doesn't have access to unless you give it to the internet, for example.
Mhm.
It's like no Bing search or other things, so it can only talk
Mm.
with your data.
try to give as little permission as possible, and that's the solution basically. What you are suggesting.
Yeah, if you open up for it to make searches on the internet, it get expensive.
And that's my issue. That's I don't see how it can be managed, but
Well, I think that's where the guardrails come in, right? There's a service that does like checking before you respond to the user. So anything you don't allow will not be. Let's say, for instance, obscene words. So once you query the LLM will not return those kind of words because there's a service behind. I think it's a Microsoft service, right?
Abuse
The
monitoring.
abuse, exactly.
So
Mhm.
So I think that gets the LLM from. So those kind of responses will not be allowed from the LLM.
So one questions, I guess, say before RAGtastic, people spent like a lot of time and effort in improving their prompt, like their best practice
Mm-hmm.
strategies around, give an example, give like a text, context and so on. So I just wonder if you have encountered any hacks that help you like specifically to RAG to improve the results. I don't know, the data should consist of tables, ASCII art, I don't know.
Markdown, as mentioned, really helps a lot. And then also, if you use YAML or JSON, if you can structure the data in any shape or form for the RAG system, then it usually becomes easier. Less prompts, less tokens, and usually a better overall answer.
also saves cost.
Yeah. It's just, does anyone know of Prompty? I learned of it yesterday, so I'm very much not an expert.
What is it?
Yeah,
Yes.
Prompty. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that's a good way of like structuring your prompts. How I understand it, but like I'm not an expert.
It's an
So
open source library you can put in. It's also Microsoft provided open source library. Prompty, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have any prompt questions or you wanna structure it or you wanna have it as efficient as possible, I think it is also like if you write a really long prompt and you're polite in it, Prompty will remove the politeness.
so it's easier to structure your prompts at least.
Cool. Any more questions?
So it's this?
Of course.
Yes,
More,
but
maybe more to Michael.
yeah.
In the AI Foundry, can you cap the token? Speaking about cost.
Yeah, I think actually you can, but maybe Ali, do you know if you can make like cap the tokens
Uh,
going in and out in Foundry?
yes, you can. So even at the stage that you're making them, you can specify to what extent that you're using, and then if you want these to be within a specific instance, or you want them to be floating, you want them to be in a batch, or you want them to be direct, and each of them have their own costs and benefits.
Yeah, but you, my question more was, can you cap it? Can you cap the spend for
Ca-
a month or a day or whatever?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a way. I just haven't.
AWS has it not, so. I guess you can do it on a model. You can
Yeah, you can do it on model.
deploy the model, you can
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
When you deploy the model, you can set something. I don't recall what it is though.
So like,
Johan promised me that security copilot will have it. At the moment it doesn't have it.
Then, okay. Our next session in February is about security copilot.
okay, the FileMail doesn't have it in the window, but I know the GPT 3.5 had it.
Even 4.0.
4.0 has it.
Do we have more questions?
I have.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, actually, today morning I used like a Copilot prompt coach in Copilot thing. So what it will do is usually it will improve the, I mean, the prompting. The first thing it said was like be polite to the AI, and just today I came to know like being polite will also cost us. So yeah, and
Find the balance.
yeah, and also I noticed that usually if
Don't
you
cross
add
the
like
line.
yeah, if you add like please and all these things, the text it generates is also quite large, the response, compared to if you remove the politeness. That's one thing that I observed. And another thing is like I just want to know like how it is calculated. I mean, how the tokens are calculated in terms of image generation. Do you have any meter? I mean, how?
For image generation, I don't know exactly, but for texts, it's like I think about 4 or 5 characters per token. Is that right?
I don't know.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's 4. So
Can
to
we?
break it down, I guess it's like every pixel can have 3 values, right? So red, green, blue,
Yeah.
and or like a hex, or I don't know how they do it exactly. But then you can like say about 1024 times 1024 if you want to make a HB picture. That's a lot of tokens. But,
Yeah.
Pictures, 1,000 words.
yeah.
Okay, so for the GPT 3.5 Turbo, you can specify the amount of tokens, but for the file models, you can't specify it.
In file models, it's default 8 KX.
Mm.
That's it.
I'm a beginner, so I don't know, but I have a feeling that the LLMs are so good right now, so you don't need to think that much about the way you formulate your prompt as you used to. But what you, I guess, what you do need to think about is the retrieval part. So if it doesn't get the context, it won't be able to answer it. So what are the options to make the retrieval as good as possible? Have you tried different models? You said that MD files are better. Is there anything else you can try to make the retrieval part better?
I this is my gut feeling, but I don't feel that is a blocker to actually using them. The challenge is actually how can you take this thing that actually works relatively well and solve something within an organization. That is the part where I think a lot of the value creation will lie. So if you have a set of, say, documents, if you have a database, how can you use that so that something better happens in the organization? That is, I think, where the value and the money is.
Very nice presentation. Now, apologies for my technical ignorance, but I'll try to. I was thinking a little bit now, a little bit around the same topic about being polite, not being polite, limitations, of course, for resources. The end goal within this prompt flow is that you do create a product that somebody will use. I mean, internally it's still used and it's still handled by people. They will be interacting with this product, so to
Yeah.
say. There is communication involved. Is there a way that in this case, if you're trying to be able to confine it into the way of how it's communicated within an organization, that there is more context that you just feed it with documentation regarding, say, brand book or how previously it's been communicated within the organization, so that the product doesn't end up being tone deaf with the people that it's speaking.
I didn't catch your
I
question.
think that's
Could you?
that's like you can pre-prompt everything that a person would put in. You can say you're gonna be polite and you're gonna answer like an HR person and yada,
Yeah.
and everything that you put in, the response will have that pre-prompt kind of. So that's a way to do it.
But then we come into the problem that then we are creating a large prompt, and then there are a lot of
Yeah,
tokens
well,
which are used.
so if you heard about semantic kernel, for example, that is, so you can have like an orchestrator in front of it, and that orchestrator could sense intents and such, and then it can route it to different, and eventually you go into an agentic session, but that is the way that stuff is built today. If you like Microsoft Copilot, if you ask stuff on that one, there's a semantic kernel in front of it.
I'll go here first. It's closer. Is it okay? Anna? You're already free. Yeah. It will come to you in a minute. Yeah.
I know that there's other platforms as well. So how do we compare like AI Factory with like maybe Bedrock or even that similar platforms?
This is way easier to use. Sorry. This is way easier to use. I tried to use Bedrock and I couldn't read the documentation. I read documentation for Azure and then I could understand the documentation for Bedrock. So my personal preference is just to use Azure. I'm not saying it because it's Azure Scorner. I'm saying it because I generally prefer the tools that Azure provides. But you can do a lot of the stuff that you do with Azure with Bedrock and the AWS ecosystem, of course. There's no sort of hard limitation.
Yeah, I think it's they're often same, but
Yeah,
I can say like from when you talk with partners, customers, it is do what's working for you. If you have like a 5 years of experience in ABS and you feel comfortable with it, and it provides the same kind of services, why shift? Unless there's an additional value add from the other. And usually it is what problem are you trying to solve and what services solves the problem the best. Yeah. If there's a big difference in the output, depending on what you choose, then choose the one that gives the best output.
we need to burn some fuel before we.
Thank you. Over to you.
You mentioned that semantic kernel.
Semantic kernel, yeah.
Yeah. And you have been showing the prompt flow. How do they relate? Are they kind of competitors, or do they solve different the problems on different levels? What do you recommend starting with?
Have you done semantic kernel? No. So I guess semantic kernel gives you the like a developer or pro. Let's say you have that low code, no code, low code, and pro code. Semantic kernel would be the one that you can customize more, and you would feel more in control as a developer. Prompt flow is the one that enables everyone else kind of with click and drag and shows you the logic. So you, if you would look at it in an architecture way, you will probably have semantic kernel as the orchestrator, prompt flow as something else where you kind of easily do some I don't know, rules and stuff, and then the models at the bottom. But they do work together.
So you can use everything in the same.
Yeah, you just have to know what you're using it for. Yeah.
You have like an endpoint, like when you are done in HR Foundry, and you have done your prompt flow and everything works. You have an endpoint you can call, which you can like make or like put as part of your semantic kernel. So it's like yeah, that's how I would use it at least, I think.
Any more questions? Any news from the pizza?
10 minutes.
minutes for pizza.
Oh, then we can have a
So
shot.
we have plenty of
But-
time.
Oh, we have more questions.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, it's more like if anybody has any experience with MLOps V2, which is like a solution explorer that has been like dead for 2 years now, but I don't see any like other frameworks that like scaffolding machine learning solutions for Azure. So
No, everyone forgot about it when Gen AI hit.
okay,
What is it?
it's a solution. It's like a scaffolding system. If like where you can like bring some inputs on like, for example, with so you can make like an entire architecture of for machine learning or AI, but it hasn't been like touched for 2 years, and I don't find any other anybody else.
Same thing in the Azure Machine Learning Studio.
Okay, that's why. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they kind of put it in there.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it was called something else than Machine Learning Studio. Now everything is in Foundry. So
Yeah.
you can get it.
Earlier it was ML Studio.
So from Microsoft perspective, that's the thing that they put out there. And then MLOps in itself there's different variations of it, but everything is being pushed in there. There's pros and cons to it. There's abstractions. As soon as you put it in a service, it has a lot of abstractions. But then depending on how deep you are, you want to know what's happening behind it. So that's also something that
Yeah. And everything in like one place. So,
definitely
yeah.
lock in. It's the gig.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, since there's time left, so. But actually, this one is because you mentioned before on the presentation, you mentioned for chat use this, for context use the other ones, and I was thinking when you make a proposal to a client or to your superiors about what LLMs to use, is there really any sense of going to a maybe solution? You know, this one will work most of the time, but but if you go for OpenAI 4.0, then you will always, that is the best. So where do you draw the line, and where can you get in trouble yourself if you, for example, recommend an LLM that might give problems instead of solutions?
Well, my goal is not to say this is the best option, and I hope I made this clear because this is I'm not saying use this because then we aren't getting into like the vision items at all. This is just like if you want to use these services and you haven't used them before, instead of spending a lot of time trying to figure out which one to use, these can be a good starting point. If you're making a prototype with an organization, these can be a good starting point. But if you want to create, if you have an initial prototype and you want to scale it up, but then the question becomes, okay, how do I fine tune which one is best for this specific purpose? Because as you iterate, you're going to change a lot of the processes. Everything's going to change. So it doesn't make sense to fix everything at the first point when you know things are going to change as you interact.
I'm just talking about the normal corporate approach that you go for the expensive and the one that is most recognized and the best. So is there really a reason to go down below the most professional ones when you're actually recommending a solution for a client or for your organization? That's really a difficult way to say, because if they could lose more money by not having the right approach or the right LLM.
What is right?
Yep. I'm just wondering what you would say. You're the expert. So.
One way we usually discuss with our clients is that when you build something, build it modular. So everything else you have on top, it's an API call or something else to your model. Just shift it out if it doesn't work. Try to have everything else working. If you look at Hugging Face, that's also like that. In AI Foundry, everything is aligned so you can switch the models. From that sense, you don't build any, what's it called? How do you say?
Legacy dependencies.
Yeah, exactly. Any dependencies towards it, then you're free. And then if your advice on the model was wrong from the beginning, it's not that bad of a thing. And but this is something that was when OpenAI came with their GPT 3.5, that was kind of the model. Everyone wanted it. But why do you need to have like the combined human knowledge to solve a recipe for a cake? That's kind of, it doesn't make sense. So
Yeah.
what we are doing now, is it still recording?
I guess you need the mic, I think. If you,
No, no.
you don't put it on the
Then
mic.
then
Broadcast,
you
that's enough.
So in March, you're probably gonna see some mentions about industry-aligned AI models based on five, and they are fine-tuned for different industry cases. So what we're actually doing is we're stripping down the knowledge from, it doesn't have to know everything about Greenland's politics to solve like some financial compliance documents. So it's gonna be harder to recommend a model. The customers or the end users needs to know what they're trying to solve and then try to figure out from there.
I can even comment that ServiceNow is using different models for different purposes in their AI support assistant, AI assistant. So take whatever fits best, test it.
And in an agentic architecture, you're gonna have multiple ones. So and you have it orchestrator in the front that sends the intent, and then you have different models answering different questions. So
Just a follow-up question to this one. Has it something to do with these industrial foundation models that Microsoft Asia research is pushing since?
yeah, so it kind of at Ignite they mentioned it,
Yeah.
but they didn't show any models. In March, you're gonna see two of them.
Okay.
Speaking about agentic,
Do we still want to record the questions? I think you're answering off the
Yeah.
mic. So we're just recording the questions. No answers is recorded.
Yeah, 2025 is supposed to be this break for the agentic AI and so on. So what is your recommendation if do you know any tools or where to start if you want to explore or drive your current solution into that direction?
Well, that is a
Starting point at least.
that is a difficult question. You guess you'll get a different answer from anybody you ask. For me personally, I think it's more important to look at where you can personally create value and then go back from there. So whatever tool you can use, whatever LLM, whatever model, you just look at the end goal in mind and see what will help you to reach that point. Maybe it's called agentic, maybe it's not.
Yeah. But is it something that is supported in Foundry or
There's so many functionalities here. Like, I didn't even go into the AI services part. Like
yeah.
you can do a lot. There's voice synthesis, two-way. There's vision capabilities.
Maybe you can look at LangChain again.
Yeah.
Or AI.
Yeah.
So those are like the two popular ones.
Question? Anybody? Anybody has this live introduction today? Anything from AI Foundry? Yeah. Okay. How is it performing after the first month? Did you have to change anything from your like except from technical things?
We do monitor, but
Yeah, let's hear about it.
we do monitor, but nothing much would change. But there are some contents coming up in terms of the new things with the organization related updates and all of that. Yeah, also if there's any problems, we do check with the AI search, check the probabilities and see what's going on, what's wrong with the models and all of that. Apart from that, all good. Yeah.
Any other
No
questions?
questions, the pizzas are here.
One last thing. We have a Discord. If you go to the meetup, you can join there. There's an AI channel. We're posting a lot of stuff. I wanted to recommend there's a bunch of accelerators that we put out. Yeah, so in Meetup, if you go in and look about the Meetup, at the bottom there, there's a Discord invite, so please join. Thank you.
Thank you very much.